Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. This is episode 141. We are finally talking about cops. Cops and killers. They go together like chocolate and peanut butter. I'm Liz Williams, and I'm joined by
Mike Campbell
and Eric Lee.
Finally, one of my wheelhouses, police horror. Sometimes more to the procedural side than the capital H horror, but I love cops and killers movies.
Thrillers.
How about you guys?
Do you have any law enforcement background or history in your family?
I do not.
Liz?
No, I do not.
No cops in the family?
Have you ever been arrested?
No, I have never been arrested. I'm going to knock on wood.
Have you ever gotten a speeding ticket?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Plenty
well,
of
that's
those.
That's something.
But
yeah,
I think it's just growing up watching Law and Order and all those kind of shows, you know.
Solved it. Dun, dun, dun.
Solved it. Yeah, I like to solve it. I like procedural. I like
I love
the
a good
plots
mystery.
are always kind of it's more of a mystery. And the plots are, I don't know, more linear than a lot of other kind of genre horror movies. So it fits my Virgo brain, I guess.
Other than food horror and maybe Arbor Day horror, this is probably the least horror of all the horrors.
Yeah.
Because it really does. That's what I was telling Eric when I first started researching this, and I went up to Movie Madness and I said, if you're looking for the horror, if you're looking for the cop horror, it's not in the horror section, it's in the thriller section. That's where they put all the cop horror films is in the thriller section because it really calibrates more towards the thriller, the mystery, the procedural than it does the horror.
And I think that one thing that I tried to focus on for this exercise was to make it about a procedural, that there's actually some detective work, and that it's not just I was tempted to go with Assault on Precinct 13, which is there's no police procedural thing. It's just a police station.
It happens to be in the police station,
that it's a it's a siege. Is one of the classic siege movies, but it's like that's not. I don't think that was the intent here. I think this is part of the the merging of the two genres.
I thought you were going to say Wolf Cop.
I would love Wolf Cop.
Wolf Cop 3.
I didn't do Wolf Cop because I was thinking that maybe somebody else might do Wolf Cop.
Not me. Well, I was like, when I went into doing this, I was like, okay, this is my wheelhouse. I'm ready. There's so many, but I wanted to do things that we really haven't talked about before because I was telling Mike before we started recording that on my top 25 list, I think 3 of the best ones are on there, and that's Exorcist 3, Silence of the Lambs, and 7. Yeah. Those are going to be like the
touchstones,
granddaddies, the touchstones, the ones that really cross the line where people will say, oh, that's horror? Okay, I like that. Maybe I like horror if you like Silence of the Lambs or 7. But there's so much, but almost every horror movie is going to have some element of law enforcement in it if it's a serial killer or anything like that. But, I made it where the cops are the main characters and it is procedural and things like that. Yep. Except one of mine's not procedural-ish, but it's 100% capital H horror because it is filled with gore.
I thought I was going to be super clever, and I was like, I've got a really good one, but I know that Mike took it.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep.
I was like, I love this movie. That I felt like, it's like, this is one that horror fans need to know about, and this is one that, cop procedural fans need to know of. And we'll wait for Mike to
get into that.
We can all talk about it together.
Because I think we all really like that
The thing that really shocked me when I was starting to research this was that I was reading a Washington Post article about police shootings and everything else, and they did a really, really extensive look into, in particular, police. It was really more police shootings, but the thing that really struck me was that there's close to 18,000 different law enforcement agencies in the United States.
Wow,
18,000 law enforcement agencies, which to me suggests that there should be a hell of a lot more cop horror films. There should be a lot more law enforcement related horror films. I mean, and to Liz's point, they all do have a wrinkle within them that speaks to law enforcement, but most of them are not inherently about law enforcement.
Now, by that,
Right.
Mike, do you mean that there are, like, for example, a police station in every community?
Right.
Yep. And then,
Yeah.
and then you have,
Well, yeah, like when
Sheriffs
I,
and
when I
everything like that. Yeah.
When I was living in Washington D.C., I remember reading an article in the Washington Weekly, and they were talking. They did a really fascinating breakdown of just the law enforcement in the District of Columbia, which ain't that big. There's 36 different law enforcement entities in the District of Columbia,
and we saw them on January the 6th.
And we saw some of them on January the 6th.
Unfortunately, some of them didn't show up in time.
Some of the other ones didn't really show up as they should have.
Yep.
But
yeah,
whatever.
The Parks Service apparently has a much more robust police presence in D.C. than in other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So, but I think if you're just talking conventional, cop drama kind of stuff, I had a lot of fun just sort of picking and choosing, because all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
This was this character. The lead was, because when death is involved, cops are involved,
right?
A lot of the times, and so this is, but at what point, I think I think episode number 4 might have been horror or not, and
right?
And so we, and as we've been alluding to, there's a lot of these that are sort of horror adjacent, if not squared up horror. But I think that's fine for this discussion. This is, we're embracing all that is sort of the in the thriller, because I think we talked about, I think there's giallo and slashers, which are
right.
There's a lot of thriller components to it, whether it's the De Palma stuff, body double or something like that, which is, it's like stab. It's like, well, but it's not, it's like not Jason Voorhees stab. But it's still, there's plenty of bloodletting and knives flashing. In this case, it's like, how, at what point do we believe that it has ventured completely into the horror genre? And I know that there's so many of these things that we're not going to be able to touch on all of them, but I'd be kind of curious later on, if we don't get to talk about some of these, just to get to pick Liz's brain to see what
I have tons of back.
Yes. Oh, good. Yeah. I was going to say, I had the exact same thought as you, Eric, about the sort of the horror or not complexity that a lot of these films take on when I was watching Maniac Cop 1, 2, and 3, which I did. I actually watched, because they're all on Shudder right now, and you can watch all of the Maniac Cops, and I might do a mini dead list of just Maniac Cops.
Yep.
But I had this sort of the same feeling, which was, it's horror to the extent that, Bruce Campbell is in the films, and, the Raimi brothers are involved.
And the guy's got like a totally messed up face.
He's got a messed up face. He's sort of a monster, but he's really kind of a tragic character in that, he's a police officer who's still trying to do good, but that he's fundamentally bad. But the whole time I just kept going, is this really horror, or is it just really, it's more like a police action film than it is a horror film.
Yeah, I've got one of mine, which is actually all of mine are adjacent. I mean,
all of mine are horror. I tried real hard, and that's
I
why
did too.
Mine are all horror.
I think
100%. Yep.
I think
100%.
I think on all 3 of mine, I think that the first line of it might. Well, 2 of them, the first line would be horror movie, and the second one would be thriller.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
We're gonna get into them then, huh?
Yeah, let's do it. Liz, I think you have to.
You want me to
lead
start?
off.
Okay.
This is the most Liz of all. Save for when you did an all Ben Wheatley episode.
That's true.
This is the most Liz of all the Liz episodes. The Liz-oriented episodes.
I've got to have a theme. So, and I didn't want to talk about, I don't know, the ones that just came off the top of my head or ones that are already on my list. So I went with all J horror. And I'm going back into the late 90s and the early 2000s with all of my picks.
Okay.
And I'm going to go in order of like gruesomeness. So I'll start with the quietest and go to the most crazy.
It can get really gory.
They can get really gory. But this one, even though it's the quietest, someone gets their face peeled off. So it is horror. And this is 1997's Cure, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. No relation to Akira Kurosawa. It stars Koji Yakushuko and Masato Hagiwara. And this is the story about a detective investigating a string of gruesome murders where all the victims have X's carved onto them. And the murderers are all right there, like by the bodies, and none of them can remember committing any of the crimes.
Ooh.
So this one came out to like big success in Japan. All the critics like went crazy and they loved it. And the South Korean director Bong Joon-ho, who just won
Familiar
the award
That
for
guy.
Parasite, said that this is one of the greatest films of all times, and that it had a big impact on his career.
Okay.
So this one, the police detective name is Kenshi Takabe, and he has a mentally unstable wife, so he's dealing with a lot of stuff at home, and he's dealing with this series of bizarre murders with all the victims having the X and all the killers not remembering killing anybody. So they don't have to really find the killer. They're right there, but they need to figure out what drove these people to kill. So this goes kind of in a crazy direction. So this guy kind of wanders in off the street, and it's this man called Mamiya, and he has no memory of what's going on. He's acting like he has amnesia, but turns out that it all is having to do with mesmerism and hypnotism.
He's got a master
Yeah.
plan.
It's a master plan. So I'm not going to get too much into it
That's very
you
clever.
want to find out what's going on. But so this is from 1997, and it's long. That's one thing with J-horror is, boy, they're real long.
They like 2-hour movies.
They really, really do like long movies. But so this one's called Cure. Kiyoshi Kurosawa, his name obviously sounds familiar, but he did Seance, he did Pulse, Charisma, Bright Future. So those were his big, late 90s, early 2000 J-horrors,
So
right up there.
He's no stranger to horror.
He's no stranger to horror. But this one, it's quiet, but it's bloody and very gruesome. The acting is fantastic, and the turn that it takes going into mesmerism and his hypnosis and following down that rabbit hole is really, really cool. And it has a ending shot that is just totally awesome. So I'm not going to spoil the end, but it has a great end shot that kind of there's no hope at the end of this movie.
Oh man.
I will say, Liz, that's one of the things that I really liked about all of the police horror films is they all have a great punchline at the end.
Yeah. You got to.
Most of them really do. And you just go, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, Eric, what do you got?
Okay, I am going to 1972.
Whoa, wait, what? That is so far out of your wheelhouse.
Oh, come on, man. This is a little British film called The Wicker Man.
Oh.
Directed by Robin Hardy, starring Edward Woodward, Christopher Lee, Britt Eklund, Ingrid Pitt, and Diane Cilento. This should be a fairly familiar movie to most of our audience, but to summarize, this folklore tale is a wonderfully paced police detective mystery wrapped in cultish cloth. Yes. Inspector Howie, Edward Woodward, is a devout man of faith, and he has been sent to investigate the disappearance of a young girl in Summerisle off the coast of Scotland. And if anybody knows anything about the islands off the coast of England, they tend to be kind of rough and cold and barren, but not Summerisle, which has got lush fruit trees. And it's like, is that a palm tree in Summerisle? How did this get here? And they believe that there are pagan rituals that have been taking place on this island that they believe has brought the bounty of the harvest to Summerisle. Of course, Inspector Howie is aghast in all this, and that he doesn't understand this culture. He encounters goes into the pub, and they're all just teasing him and taunting him and seducing him, and it just makes him very, very uncomfortable. He is the classic stiff upper lip Brit who is uptight and wound, just he wants to do right by God. And and then Britt Eklund tries to seduce him through the wall, which is one of those classic scenes.
Oh God, that scene is so bad.
Oh, she's singing a song to him and he's freaking out because he can't take
Yep.
it, even though he can't see. It's like, we know what's going on, but he doesn't know what's going on. But at the same time, it's like, it's all this folk music playing around. But just so he does, however, have a serious set of detective skills. But he keeps on chasing dead ends as Lord Summerisle, Christopher Lee, and all of the population charm and deflect and mislead. And it's like, it's like, oh yeah, Rowan, yeah, her grave is over here. It's like, she's not there. And then he eventually believes that he's onto something, that his forensic skills uncover a ritual sacrifice that requires a virgin, and he fully expects that Rowan has been kept hostage on the island. And as a police procedural, he really does follow the clues, but the cult of Summerisle is ahead of the game. This is a story of hubris, with Howie thinking himself somehow superior to these pagans.
Right.
And blind to the creativity nested in the happiness are some very clever and scheming villagers. And as he's propped up by his own excessive pride, Howie takes a major fall. And if you don't know it, it's classic.
It is.
Yeah. And for Inspector Howie, a too confident man, convinced of his own righteousness, he is blind to the world around him. It is the cop in a strange land. He is there are a lot of other. I mean, you see it in some other things where you take the city cop and you put him in the country,
right?
And and that's a classic in just cop dramas.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's you take the city cop and you put him on a pagan cult island, and granted, these aren't the scariest cultists you'd ever run into until the end, and then it's like, and it was like, oh no! But he doomed himself. I mean, that was the amazing thing, is that he brought doom upon himself, and he thought he had outsmarted them, and no, he was being fed this, and Wicker Man.
See now, okay, quick hot take.
Yeah.
I watched the 2006 Nicolas Cage Wicker Man,
Oh, you did?
which is a far worse film.
Yes.
But I think the law enforcement component of the 2006 Wicker Man is more prominent.
Yeah. It's interesting because Inspector Howie he goes.
Because Nicolas Cage is running around the island going, "You're subpoenaed, and I need evidence, and open that door." And it's like, what is what? Who is this guy?
Well, there is a bit of Edward Woodward does a lot of this demanding. I demand the name of the Queen. Let me into this building, and then and then they let him in. It's like, see, there's nothing here, sir.
Right.
And he goes, it's like, you guys are hiding something. Right. Where is she?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Just like, calm down, fella. But he just gets all wrapped up into it, and boy, the great, I think the most satisfying thing is when he realizes they got me.
Yeah.
And it was like, and then he's just sort of he's trapped.
Right, which is also different in the 2006 remake.
Yeah.
Is Nicolas Cage is relentless till the end.
Yeah.
And he never has that realization.
Yeah, he does.
He never has the realization that they got me. He's like, hell no, I'm not going down without a fight.
Nicolas Cage.
In classic Nicolas Cage fashion.
The come to Jesus moment, quite literally.
Right.
Okay.
All right. My first film is a film, 2014 film. It's a supernatural horror film directed by Scott Derrickson and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer that I was like super leery going into. Not to mention that it also features Olivia Munn and Joel McHale, which was like, what? It does feature Eric Bana, who I generally like a lot of the stuff he does. This is this is a film called Deliver Us from Evil, which I started into, and I thought, okay, well, this really, this has a very sort of mid-aughts kind of look to it, where it's a really dark, sort of dark and foreboding quality, and everything is sort of like in sort of a navy blue and gray patterns. But it turned out to be a really, really interesting film, and it's actually based on allegedly an actual account from a New York Police Department sergeant and Catholic demonologist, a guy named Ralph Sarchi, that's the character that Eric Bana plays. And this guy wrote a book called Beware the Night, which detailed many of his paranormal investigations over the years, the sergeant. And the accounts that he detailed in his books were essentially turned into Deliver Us from Evil. And the film basically involves three gentlemen who are, or the way they've rewritten it, they're three Marines who are over in Iraq who encounter some sort of ancient Sumerian temple, and they bring the evil back with them.
Nothing good in a Sumerian temple.
To New York.
Pazuzu.
No, there's absolutely nothing good. And then so Eric Bana, a.k.a. Ralph Sarchi, is forced to investigate this series of crimes with a very unconventional priest who is schooled in the rites of exorcism. And I was as I
Who's
say,
the priest?
I was I don't remember the Edgar Ramirez is the priest, who's kind of he's an actor you've probably seen before, but when you watch it you go, I think I've seen this guy before.
Yeah,
I don't know who he is. I will say it's a film that it is a little cliched. It does devolve into, hey, I think I've seen this movie before in a couple occasions, but there are a number of really, really effective scares, and Eric Bana plays Ralph Sarchi, this really, really kind of hard-headed cop who is, determined to figure this out. And it doesn't matter how dark the basement is. It doesn't matter how weird the house is. It doesn't matter how strange and off-putting the people are that he's interviewing. He is going to get to the bottom of this case. And there's enough really great supernatural and paranormal stuff in it that I highly recommend it, coupled with the fact that it is a pretty big budget film, and it's produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, so there's definitely some
explosions.
Well, there might have been an explosion or two, okay. But there's definitely some money. I mean, there's definitely some money behind it, so the quality of the film is pretty solid. Mm-hmm. So, Deliver Us from Evil 2014.
Interesting.
Have either of you guys seen it?
I have not seen it.
Liz?
I know I've seen it, but I honestly don't remember that much about it.
I encourage you to give it a look.
Yeah.
Take a peek.
Rewatch.
Okay. Yes.
Liz.
Okay. Number 2. This is a Japanese crime horror TV miniseries by Takashi Miike called MPD Psycho, or the full title is Multiple Personality Detective Psycho Kazuhuku Amaya Returns.
Yeah.
So this is from 2000. It's 6 parts, and it was based on a manga, and it aired on a TV in Japan. And okay, so this is, I'm going to try to even tell you about this. Okay, so this is about.
I think this might have. This might deserve its own podcast.
It probably does.
just based on that title.
So the funny thing is, I have these on DVDs. Gwen gave them to me, brought them back from some convention or something, because she used to always bring me DVDs and stuff. So they're on my, region-free player. The subtitles go in and out, so if I didn't get it, because it's literally a surrealist, like who knows what, it's probably because they just weren't saying anything in English. So, okay. This is about a detective named Yosuke Kobayashi, and his wife was killed by a serial killer named Shinji Nishizono. And he goes into shock after this incident. So he suffers from multiple personality disorder, and he splits into 2 other characters. So he is living his other life as Kazuko Amamiya and like running a cafe, but one of his old buddies from the force still keeps in touch with him and everything like that. And they're going to need him to solve some crimes, and he switches back into Kobayashi, his original personality, in order to figure out what is going on, because we have got a whole bunch of crazy psychos killing people. So the beginning episodes, I'm obviously not going to go through them all, but like the first one is that someone is turning people into human flower pots. They are cutting off the top of their head and planting flowers in their brains. So these people are just walking around like zombies with flowers growing out of their brains. And then they're burying them in the ground. So like a gardener finds one and freaks out, and it's crazy. So all of these victims also have these barcodes like tattooed in their eyes, and it's totally bizarre. And
Barcodes
the killer,
like for pupils.
yeah, like at the bottom, like you have to pull down their eyelids,
Okay,
and then
yeah,
you'll
so
see a barcode.
It's very cyberpunky, right?
Yeah, very
much in the
cyber. I mean,
Japanese
this is
wheelhouse,
2000.
sure.
Oh, and also the killers are, going like supernatural things are happening, and they're traveling through the phone lines and the internet, because it was cell phones were new,
Sure.
the internet was new, to get into other bodies. So it starts with the people who are the human flower pots. Then there's a cop who is, a killer who's cutting babies out of people's wombs. Then there's a mass suicide of 40 schoolgirls, totally Japanese from the 2000s. A bunch of severed body parts being found on the fields, and it's all connected through this barcoder network and what's going on. There's like a musician who makes this song that turns people kind of crazy. So it is completely bizarre.
So
It's
Liz,
Takeshi Miike. I mean, yes.
Liz, other than your bootleg DVD copy, is there a way to watch this?
Yes, that's a big question.
Oh, you know what? That's a good question. It's got to be streaming somewhere. I'm going to look that up.
My interest is super piqued, but
It's like, I've never heard of this.
It's got to be.
Well,
hang on,
Eric,
I'm
that's
Googling.
the reason you listen to this podcast, so you can learn stuff,
Oh, right.
and so we can
Yeah.
help the entire world
See,
understand where to watch great horror films.
That's where I'm acting as the cipher here.
Oh, yeah.
right?
Well, I like it.
I'm going to have to get back to you on where to see this, because
All
I don't know
right,
if you can.
All
I'm going to be
right.
honest.
all right.
You might have to make your way to Movie Madness.
Yeah,
I know they'll have it.
Oh yeah, they will.
Yeah.
They will for sure.
It's 3 discs. So if someone says, oh, no, it's only on 1, that's going to be an animated one that was based on the manga, because it's 3 discs.
Speaking of Movie Madness, I don't want to preempt Eric, but when I returned the 3 movies that I watched, that I rented at Movie Madness for this episode, the fella at Movie Madness said, "Wow, great picks."
Oh, cool. I think you can see these on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There you
cool.
go.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, what do you got next?
I have a fun, pure 80s wackadoodle science fiction horror movie called The Hidden.
Oh
Directed
Hidden.
by a man named Jack Shoulder, who's a bit of a nefarious creep. He's the director from A Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Right.
So I don't want to give him too much credit, but it is a hell of a fun movie. Michael Nouri plays Sergeant Beck, who is works in the LAPD investigating the sudden violent turn of normal citizens who go on these id-fueled violent rampages of looting and murder.
Right.
And then he's joined by Agent Gallagher, played by Kyle MacLachlan,
That's right.
who comes in from the FBI Seattle agency, apparently, and he has deep background on the suspects. He's awkward and stiff. He's an awkward and stiff fed, which is classic, right?
Yeah.
That is a trope of local cop knows the beat. All of a
Right.
sudden, the feds come in, and you're it's like this is the Agent Mulder thing, kind of. It's
Right.
like the weirdo fed who knows a little bit too much about this very strange happening. And Beck is an old school grizzled sergeant who's got respect throughout the department. Classic.
Yeah, you gotta have
cop
that.
tropes up and down. And as it turns out, there's a body-hopping alien parasite that acts purely on selfish impulses, that has a penchant for Ferraris, 80s hair metal, and strippers.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this,
The host-
and I am
Yeah,
going to watch
yeah.
it tomorrow.
Liz, if you saw the poster for The Hidden, you would go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." Yeah.
all right,
but
I'll
but
look
the
it up.
but the movie itself, I guess the thing is that this slug alien thing that starts crawling into these bodies the host body can take a ton of damage before it goes down, but only Agent Gallagher knows how to deal with it because he's got a secret. And the alien hops from a bank robbing stockbroker at the beginning of the movie, and it feels like somebody was watching Miami Vice and it's like, hey, if we can take Miami Vice and Beverly Hills Cop and then mix it with Terminator and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, what would we get? And it's like, well, you get something like this.
You get the hidden.
It is quintessentially 80s material. It's packed full. It's like there's like the guy, the aliens they're a lot of fun because they just the actors just kind of go glassy eyed and just go, I want this. And it's like, and they steal, they'll go out and they'll steal Ferraris and a boombox. One of the guys goes and just starts going into a record store and starts pocketing cassette tapes. And when and there's a hipster record store shopkeeper, and he goes, hey man, what are you doing? I'm gonna fuck you up. Comes up with a billy club, and the guy just turns around and just mauls the shopkeeper. And then, but he's pocketing punk rock cassette tapes, and then he goes into a diner and then just starts cranking tunes in the boombox. It's very, very silly. It is. There's a lot of Sam Peckinpah in here. There's just like the amount of because what they really revel in is all the squibs, because they just like unload on these the parasite hosts, and like the stripper who can take like 30 bullets and she just keeps firing shotguns at these guys. It is a hoot, and there's all and you get a lot of the I don't trust the Fed, lock him up, because it's like he's acting strange, and then it's like, no, we need to unlock him because he knows the truth, and hey, what's wrong with the captain? There's all of these great kind of signature cop drama things. But they're done very, very earnestly, and it's fun.
Did you
it's
go?
A lot of fun.
Did you go back and watch it?
I just watched it.
You did?
I just watched it last week.
Oh, okay.
Because it was like,
okay.
I
wasn't sure if this was like based on very vague memories of the 1980s.
I just watched because I remember this play. This came out in 1987. So I was a senior in high school.
Yeah.
So this was. Straight to my 17-year-old brain.
Right.
It's like, all right, Ferrari, shotguns, and strippers. What can go wrong?
I definitely remember seeing it in the dorm somehow, some way.
I think we might have seen it as movie night.
Right.
It might have been we doubled it with the Blob. That kind of thing.
Yeah. For sure.
And it really descends into lowbrow kind of 80s trashy humor, but it oddly feels like it's got a lot of heart.
Yeah.
I think it's there is the Kyle MacLachlan character is so endearing and odd.
Right.
And I think he establishes himself as weirdo actor, like this beautiful weirdo actor.
Right.
But because he's just he looks like he's made out of porcelain.
Right.
It's very strange.
I mean, that's got to be what got him the Twin Peaks gig.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So anyways,
All right.
1987.
All right, next on my list is a 2014 British-Irish film that actually takes place in Scotland. Yes, there's that many countries within Great Britain. This is Let Us Pray,
this is a good one.
Directed by Brian O'Malley. And, as I was watching this, it seemed to me this is like the closest that you can get to Seven without actually being Seven, the movie. Mm-hmm. This is a film that it takes place all in a remote Scottish police station. The entire film takes place in a police station. A mysterious stranger takes over the minds and souls of all of the police officers and a couple criminals in the police station, and essentially gets them to, by hook or by crook,
do horrible things to each other.
Gets them to sort of admit their
sins.
Their sins.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating the way he does it. And the images and the memories that start flooding back into both the police officers and the prisoners, and then you start to see how despicable everyone really is.
So is it this stranger?
Mm-hmm.
Is he okay? So is he coming in the form of an angel or a devil?
Well, you have to watch the movie to find out.
Yeah.
Power of Christ compels you.
Yes. What's that?
It's a good movie.
It is. It is.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah, it all focuses around a constable, Rachel Heggie, and she has, and they disclose early on in the film, she may have been abducted as a child, and so that's sort of the not necessarily the sin, but repressed memory that she's dealing with. Is this like, and also her connection to law enforcement, right? So she was like abducted and, forced to, do horrible things as a child. And then, she's spun that horrible memory into her interest in law enforcement and wanting to make sure that, justice is served. It's fascinating the way the film takes place because, as I say for a couple shots, like a couple establishing shots, a couple of the memories, it is all set in the police station, which is really like the jail down below and then the sort of administrative offices up above. But everything else, it's like,
economy of scale in filmmaking.
Yeah.
But but it also, so in a way, this could be a stage drama.
It could. Yeah, it absolutely could.
Mm-hmm. Save
for the film, much like we've talked about in one of our all-time favorite films of 2021, The Feast, this film has a very different pace than The Feast, but in the same way that The Feast goes off the rails in the third act, this totally goes off the rails.
Oh, yeah.
And there is so much murder and mayhem and and torture and despair at the end of the film that it's like it's kind of amazing that they were able to do so much in a police station with clearly a very, very limited budget.
Right.
Yeah. So 2014, Let Us Pray. I hadn't heard about this one until I started doing the research. And the director, he also did the film The Lodgers from a couple years ago, which is a sort of a ghostly paranormal type film. But I'm hopeful to see more from Brian O'Malley because I think he's definitely onto something.
Okay. Liz, your number one.
My number one is 2008's action splatter horror comedy Tokyo Gore Police.
Yes.
It's got police in the title.
Liz, I almost did this one, but once I heard that you're going all J horror, and it's like but I was hoping that you would do Tokyo.
Heck yeah,
Gore
Tokyo
Police.
Gore Police. Okay, so this is written, edited, and directed by Yoshiro Nishimura, and it stars Ihi Shina as Ruka, and that is the girl from Audition. And so she plays her father was a police officer. He's murdered by a killer, and she decides when she grows up she's going to be police. And this is taking place in the future and Japan. And there's a mad scientist known as the Key Man who is created a virus that mutates humans into things that they're calling engineers. So whenever they have an injury, they sprout like bizarre weapons. So if your arm gets cut off, a gun's going to grow through it. And so they've privatized the Tokyo police force to deal with this. So now they just have like a special, super cool unit called engineer hunters. And they use violence, sadism, and street side executions to maintain law and order. So this is one of the bloodiest films you will ever see. But it is silly gore.
It's over the top.
Over the top.
Yes.
Like if they cut off someone's hand, I mean, like it just spurts out like you have a fire hose, for like 3 minutes. It is completely
why give you 1
wild.
Gallon when 10 gallons could make
Right.
it look better.
When you have 10 gallons, exactly. I don't want to spoil it, even though it's so silly. But like, I can't even tell you what happens in this movie. I mean, like, there's backfighting in the police office, like the what's he called? Like the the commissioner may or may not be the bad guy here. Ruka, that's the name of the main character, may or may not turn into an engineer herself in order to have to, defeat this guy. It's completely bizarre.
It is a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. here is what Michael Esposito from the Chicago Tribune said about it. He said, "It is sick, twisted, and gory, but surprisingly funny in an adolescent boy fantasy way. Beavis and Butthead would love it." And that is totally true. I mean, it is it is over the top gore. It is funny. It has that kind of the Japanese girl who's wearing like the little hat like from Battle Royale, who's like, "Oh my God, everything's blowing up," and like, ha. And they're like,
Mini skirts and
these
katanas.
like, exactly. They show these like commercials throughout it that are for like little personal box cutters because everybody's cutting themselves, and that's just like a thing. It's so bizarre that I can't.
This is
you just got to see it to believe it.
I think when I saw this, it was sort of I double featured this with Meatball Machine.
Oh, that's right.
Meatball Machine.
Yeah, because you did Meatball Machine for technological horror.
Yep.
Yes, you did.
All right.
And
what else? What else has that director done?
That director has also done Meatball Machine and a lot of stuff. So
but
recently he did a piece for the ABCs of Death. He actually had Vampire Girl versus Frankenstein Girl, Mutant Girl Squad,
nice.
Hell Driver.
So he's stuck in the genre.
It is Japanese. Yeah. It is Japanese B horror extremism.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like it.
B movie extremism.
I like
it.
But
awesome.
It's just
so much fun.
Right. And for people who think that foreign films can't be just silly, deliriously silly fun.
Silly fun.
Tokyo Gore Police.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, what do you got for your number one horror police procedural horror film?
I'm going with one of the landmarks.
Oh,
I kind of have to.
Okay.
This one. I'm going with 7.
Oh,
good.
Nice.
That's one of the best.
Yeah. And if you didn't know, directed by David Fincher, and if you didn't know, starring Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Kevin Spacey.
Yep.
Familiar names all, right? This is quintessential procedural horror. Mm-hmm. And it is firmly in the horror or not, but in the context of what we're talking about here, it fits 100%.
I think it's horror, yeah.
It's pretty horrific.
Yeah. This is David Fincher showing off his visual skill with lighting and color, and you have, you got the Hall of Fame acting group that absolutely convinces you of the premise that a serial killer is exacting horrible things that tie specifically back to the 7 sins, right? You don't actually. I think one of the amazing things is this leaves a lot to your imagination, but they show the grisly aftermath.
You're right.
Right.
They don't show you the acting, but it is just that much more horrific when you don't actually get to see the actual murders happen, but the gluttony and the sloth and lust and greed, they're all you realize your brain connects the dots and you go, that's awful.
Right.
That's just absolutely and it's like it's gag inducing awful. And the detective portion of this is top shelf, and I love how you had I think this is Morgan Freeman's best performance. I think this is
so good.
Yeah, Detective Somerset.
Save for easy reader. Sorry. But he plays the tough old cop, but he doesn't play. A lot of the times you'll get the cliche of the tough old cop who's kind of an asshole who kind of warms up. He's the mentor, and then he has to rein in Brad Pitt's more
like
impulsive,
the gung ho rookie.
Yeah, and I think this also was. This was early in Pitt and Paltrow's careers, and they both sort of established that they were more than because they were notably pretty faces.
Right.
And they were a couple when they made this.
Right, and so this was like
this is pre Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah, she was with them first. Yeah,
I let my People magazine subscription lapse that year. Sorry,
fire back in the 90s.
And Kevin Spacey, following up what he did with the Usual Suspects, he's also great in this. That he plays the quiet weirdo, and I think that the the end sequence is one of the greatest ever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't look at a box without saying,
What's in the box? Come on, what's in the box? And
everybody says it.
I think that the only thing that I mark against this is that the movie feels like for 90% of the movie that it's like it's Gotham City or it's New York or Philly or Boston or Chicago or one of these gritty industrial metropolises, and then they end up out in the desert, and it's like, no, I guess it's L.A.
No, they're like in a field, like with power lines and stuff like that. I don't think it's the desert.
Yeah, or it felt like you're going up the grapevine out of LA.
Yeah, the wilderness or whatever. Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well that places it somewhere else in my mind, and that always was kind of this for me because there was so much sort of rain and grit and grime, which is not LA.
It did feel like sort of a little bit of a non sequitur. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like,
yeah, I get that.
But I think it would have been. It's like, David, next time you just kind of like go out in the backwoods and you can still do what's in the box.
Right.
But it was that the creativity in how the sins got portrayed, and the levels to which Pitt gets reeled in. That Detective Mills he's the perfect target for the killer, and he's just that impulsive gung ho kind of cop, and then it sort of brings him down. And the great thing is this is a standalone movie. I think that's one thing that you'll find with a lot of these is that you don't like there is no sequel to. Well, I guess you do have a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs. To take that back, you have Hannibal.
Yeah.
And, or Red Dragon, and then
the sequel to 7 is 14.
Yeah. 14 sins. We forgot to tell you about the other 7. What it was like.
Well, I think the thing too is you forget what a great actor Brad Pitt is, and this was obviously early on in his career. But I mean, and the other thing too is he hasn't touched horror a lot. I mean, he did obviously Interview with the Vampire. He did some Tales from the Crypt. He did he did well. Yeah, that was a mess. But he did do a little Tales from the Crypt. He did that Freddy's Nightmares, the TV show in the 80s.
Yeah.
So he was like super young. So he's like only kind of touched on horror a little bit. This is probably the most horror of all the horror stuff he's done.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is that he took a guy, and he's both the kind of a guy you kind of want to shame, but he's also empathetic.
Right.
That you really do, and once you realize, you figured out what's in the box. As soon as Somerset opens the box, you go, oh no,
yeah.
And it's like, don't come close. Don't you come close now. And then it was like,
so much like The Hidden, did you go back and rewatch this one?
Oh, I've seen this so many times.
Oh, okay,
This is one of those.
I honestly
I could watch this a million times.
I have not seen it since I saw it in the theaters.
Are you kidding me?
No, I have not gone back and rewatched it. But partially because I remember being like kind of traumatized when I first saw it and being like, "Whew, this is a lot to take in."
It is, granted, but when this. For a while, there's like it shows up on HBO. It's like I'm watching it.
It holds up.
It's beautiful. It's a benchmark. So, anyways, that's my number one.
All right,
Mike.
I saved this one for number one.
Yeah,
I went from least violent to most violent. But in particular, I saved this one so we could all discuss it because I know this was one that we had all seen, save for me.
Welcome to the club.
And again, going back to my conversation with the fellow at Movie Madness when I was talking to him about this, he said he saw it in the theater when it first came out. And he went out the next day and bought a Blu-ray copy. He ordered some weird Blu-ray copy of it because he was like, more people need to see this film. I need to share this film with everyone. Yep. This, of course, is the 2010 South Korean action thriller film, I Saw the Devil. And man,
so good.
It is, whoo, what a gut punch. But I mean, kind of like in the same way that, Brad Pitt is both sort of an empathetic character and kind of a scumbag, you quickly realize that one of the main characters in this film also sort of embarks on the same kind of character traits. The film basically involves a young woman who is seeking roadside assistance in rural South Korea, and she's brutally murdered by a serial killer. And unbeknownst to the serial killer, the the young woman's fiance is part of, I think it's effectively their like FBI. It's their like National Intelligence
Right.
Service. And this gentleman is hell-bent on revenge, but not just revenge, slow and tortured revenge.
Slow revenge.
Yes.
Well,
and repeated revenge. So it's like he
lets him get away and gets him back revenge.
Yes. And if he stabs him, he sews up the wound. If he, breaks his fingers, he puts it in a cast. Like he does everything he can to like make sure that this person continues
suffering
to be alive.
Yeah.
And suffering. Mm-hmm. And of course that's where the film really gets interesting because, much like a lot of the South Korean films, there's an incredible amount of melodrama around the film, like all those. It becomes incredibly complex, like a lot of those films. But the thing that's really interesting is because it's so complex and because there's so much melodrama, they get to pick apart at his character traits and his character flaws, and you quickly see, and you start to question, as does everybody else in the film that this gentleman is interacting with, that maybe his motives aren't so pure, and or maybe they are so pure, but that's what's making them so corrupt. Yeah. Well, and is how pure they are because he's blinded by everything else.
Right.
He got pushed. I mean, this really is. It's. I think there's a bit kind of the Dirty Harry thing. You just got pushed so far, and more extreme than the Dirty. I mean, it's like this makes Dirty Harry seem like a choir boy.
Yeah, and Dirty Harry is at the end of the day, well, not by today's standards, but from days of yore, somewhat of still an empathetic character. this fella,
the murdering asshole cop kind of.
This character, whose name I can't even remember. He is. He really takes on kind of despicable qualities.
But there's also they populated with some other fascinating characters like the cannibal.
Oh, there's some cannibalism in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which that's kind of what I was referring to with the sort of maybe unnecessary complexity of the film.
Yeah. Right.
It was an interesting plot point, but that it really sort of became. It's like they could have easily shaved off 25 minutes of the film.
Right.
Because it was a long movie.
I think the other thing was that
came in well over 2 hours.
With that was just like, well, there is worse, and it's like, here's the cannibals.
Yeah.
And I think I was explaining to you guys. I just saw Don't Breathe 2, where they inverted the notion of what the empathy for the blind man.
Right.
But they have a hard time when you're trying to make a guy who is that violent and despicable into a good guy. You have to make the bad guys really, really bad.
Right.
But that movie does something where it sort of juxtaposes. It goes back and forth where you go, oh no, maybe he is the bad guy again. No, he's good. These guys are truly awful. Well, maybe and I think that's what the cannibals proved to be a foil. It's like, okay, so this guy's gone over the edge.
People. Yeah.
But at least he's not eating people.
Well, and in this case, the serial killer is despicable, and he remains despicable throughout the entire film.
Oh no, you want him to. I think you're cheering on when this guy's getting tortured, and that is kind of the Dirty Harry thing. It is like, you go ahead and you meet some justice on these bad guys.
But the opening scene, like just when he kills the girl, like it's so cold. He just like looks over and is like starts beating her with a tire thing or whatever.
Yeah, a wrench.
And you're just like, what? So cold. He just like walks into one place and starts assaulting somebody. You know what I mean? Like it's so bizarre. And
with all the killings that he does, there is a realism to all of it that's it's really unlike Tokyo.
It's really violent.
Police.
It's hard to watch.
It's incredibly hard to watch. I don't know that I'll go back and watch it ever again, but
I've seen it a couple of times.
Having seen it,
Liz has got the fortitude.
I know, Liz.
Well, I watched it over. I did all like K horror over Christmas.
What was the Christmas movie that you said like you like to watch for at Christmas time because it's
Oh, inside. Yeah. Like all interior. But that's a Christmas movie. So I totally agree with this choice, but I need to throw one in because, Mike, I thought you were going to pick this movie, so I didn't. And it's one of the best, and it's Last Shift.
Oh. I almost did, but I saw these three.
Yeah.
And I had talked about Last Shift when we did that best of the decade, and I thought, you know what? I did kind of touch on Last Shift a little bit, and if push came to shove, I would say Last Shift was probably a better film than Deliver Us from Evil, but
I don't think it's as much of a procedural.
Yeah, it all takes place in a police station.
It's a cop, and it takes place in a police
in the same way. In the same way that I didn't do Assault on Precinct 13, it's like
right.
I think the last shift is a survival movie,
right?
Where it's less about solve a case,
right,
which is like I think
true. But I'm going to throw that one out there that people need to see it.
Yes,
if they
absolutely.
Haven't
seen it. I thought the one that I thought that Mike was going to do.
Oh, what's that?
I thought you were going to do New York Ripper.
Oh no. No, the one that I was half tempted to talk about, which is impossible to find. Thanks, Movie Madness. Once again, I think I've given Movie Madness like 4 shout outs on this podcast alone, but is a film called Red State, the Kevin Smith film. You cannot get this. You cannot.
Why not?
Oh yeah, you were talking about
it. Is
that.
not available for streaming. It is not available. Like a DVD copy of it is like $120. It's insane. It was one of those films. Came out, did its theater run. They pressed a couple DVDs. That was it. It's impossible to get now.
Wow.
But yeah, Red State definitely has a real sort of, in the same way as like Ty West Sacrament, a real kind of a real horror vibe. And
I don't recall that it had a police component to it, though.
Well, the FBI and it's the sheriff who's engaged in homosexuality, which kind of sort of undoes the whole sort of
the puritanical conceit.
Yeah. But then John Goodman as the FBI officer who's forced to go to the religious compound to deal with the religious lunatics. Yeah. So it's got both sort of a local law enforcement component as well as the FBI component.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to, before we close shop here,
yes.
As I stated in the beginning of the podcast, I wanted to ping some things off of our resident procedural horror. It's like, so do you consider I'm gonna throw these out there, and you tell me whether you think these are horror or not, Liz.
Okay.
Ooh. Kiss the Girls.
No.
Okay. Shutter Island.
No.
I watched Shutter Island.
I liked that one though. I like the book better.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Bone Collector.
No.
Mm-mm.
And Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
Okay. That one was kind of like
I would say the first third of Shutter Island is horror, and then the last 2/3 have nothing to do with horror.
Yeah, that could be. That would be fair.
In fact,
it has a horror vibe.
Here's another one. Zodiac.
I almost want to say yes for that one because whenever
that's on the edge.
It's true, it always pushes it a little bit. The toe goes over the line.
Really good movie. But
I love that movie.
But it is, and it's it is definitely a serial killer. But there's nothing. There's not a supernatural component to it. Not that you need to, because certainly like Seven, I think it's fantastical, but it's not supernatural.
Right.
Going
back
to another one that's Korean is Memories of Murder. That's also a good one that I was going to talk about, but I went all Japanese. And that's about like these, they're almost like bumbling cops in this one, but it's supposed to be based on the true story of Korea's first serial killer. And like the cops have never dealt with this. And it's pretty good. And that's also very gruesome.
Oh, one more.
Yes.
One of I know Liz's favorites, Prisoners.
I love Prisoners, but that doesn't have cops really. That's the parents.
It is taking the law into your own hands.
Yeah.
It's more vigilante justice than cops.
It's also not horror, but it's one of the most horrific movies I've ever seen, and I love that movie. 5 stars.
Yeah.
Going back to Shutter Island, I would say that is easily Martin Scorsese's worst film. 100% his worst film. But
He did that?
Yeah.
yeah. But if he wants to come on to the podcast and talk a little
Defend your movie, Mr.
Talk a
Or
Scorsese.
Leo. We'll take Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah.
or Leonardo, you're welcome to come on the podcast as well. But I think we'd prefer probably Martin Scorsese. I think that would be interesting to have him come and talk to us. I know he's a big fan of Freaks, but I would love to have him on the podcast to talk to us a little bit about Shutter Island, which I think is his worst film.
Wow.
Even though I enjoyed a lot of
But
it.
that also, I think, is a testament to how many good films he's done.
Yeah, I
Yes.
liked it.
Yeah,
I still like Shutter Island. I was
Yeah,
like, very moody, kind of. It had kind of ghosty overtones to it.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that closes the door for us on
Cop horror.
Cop
Top
rock.
horror. I have a tagline to take us out.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent.
It is the tagline from Tokyo Gore Police, and it is strap yourselves in because things are about to get very, very bloody and very, very strange.
Yes.